Erev Tov, Rabotai. Let's continue with Pirkeh Avot. So yesterday we were talking about the bad ways that a person lives his life. We talked about Ain Ra'ah. We talked about Shachen Ra, bad neighbor. Then we talked about bad friend. Then we talked about somebody who borrows money and doesn't pay back. All these things are a bad lifestyle. That's what we said, right? So comes now in the end and says like this. He says, even though all these things, the last one, it says levra, right, which is bad heart, bad-hearted person. We already spoke about this a little bit. What does it mean? What does it mean to have a good heart? What does it mean to have a bad heart? But comes, right, the Pirkeh Avot here and says, if you have a bad heart, this is like, it equals all of them together combined. So what does that mean? The bad heart brings all these problems. Whether it's bad neighbor, whether it's bad friend, whether it's you don't pay back your loans, whether it's Ain Ra'ah, all these are caused by one thing. You know what they're caused by? Because a person has a levra, he has a bad heart, and this is why these things occur. Because everything has to do with the heart. Everything comes from there. The source of everything is from there. So if a person has a bad heart, all these things are going to happen to him. So what does that mean, right? That teaching you Pirkeh Avot, that having a good heart is a very, very important thing. If a person doesn't have a good heart, I'll tell you something. People can see, if a person has a good heart. They can see. They see what you have, where your heart is, by the way you behave, by the way you react to them. So what happens is, when a person has a bad heart, you know what happens, right? People don't like him. They tell you, everybody, this guy, not a good guy, bad guy. Because nobody likes him. Why is that? Because he has a lev ra. So because he has a bad heart, he behaves badly towards people. And you can see it, in the way he behaves, and the way it comes out, out of his behavior. You can see that the guy's, something is wrong inside there. Something is not right, So that equals all of them combined. That's what it's saying over here, Pirkeh Avot, right? That that is really the source and the root of all these problems. Right? Okay, great. So let's move on. So then it goes on to the teachings of Rabbi Eliezer, right? As we said, Rabbi Eliezer was one of the great rabbis of the Talmud, one of the great Tanaim. In his generation, he was the best. So it says over here, "Yikavod chavercha chaviv alecha keshelcha." So what does that mean? Honor your fellow Jew just like yourself. And this is a very important thing, by the way, because if you don't, what happens is like this, that if you don't give kavod to others, you know what happens, right? They don't give kavod to you either, so it causes a bad relation, between Jews. There's no kavod. So what does that mean? Give him the same kavod that you want to receive for yourself. At least that much. They got to give him the same. If you don't give him the same, that means that you love yourself more than you love him. Something's wrong. You don't love this guy like you love yourself, because you want to be treated with kavod, right? You want kavod. You want to be treated nicely with everybody. But the problem is that when you treat other people, you don't give them the proper kavod. And the reason is because something is wrong with your neshama. Something is wrong with your behavior. You don't give them the proper kavod. You look down at people. That's no good. A person like this, he thinks that other people are inferior to him. He deserves the kavod, but his friends not so much. We can treat them, not so much with kavod. So that's the way it is, So therefore they tell you, treat the other people with the same kavod as you want for yourself. Right? And this is really the same thing, this, what we're saying over here, is the same as all the other lessons that we learn. Right? Like it says, right? Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. The Chazal say, right? Love your fellow just like you love yourself. Because if you love him just like you love yourself, you're going to also treat him with the same kavod as you give to yourself, as you want yourself. So one thing causes the other, This is all the same. Why don't you treat people with kavod? You want to treat people with kavod. You don't give them kavod because you don't love them. This is the problem. You love yourself, selfishness. Person who's selfish, no good. So a person has to get to that level where your fellow's kavod has to be important to you. Because if you hurt him, if you hurt his kavod and demean his kavod, that shows, that you don't love him properly. You don't treat him the way you want to be treated yourself. Something is wrong there. That's why, they asked Rabbi Akiva one time. It says in the Talmud. They asked him, one person who wanted to convert. He asked Rabbi Akiva, tell me in Judaism, in a nutshell, like in one statement, what is it all about, You know the story, right? He told him like this. So Rabbi Akiva told him, I'll tell you what it is. He says, Masha sanu lecha, al taseh lechaverecha. Whatever you don't want, right, for yourself, don't do it to your fellow Jew. Don't do it. And it's the same thing, what we're saying. All these things are the same. You understand? You have to treat others the way you want to be treated. So whatever you don't like people do to you, don't do it to them. And if you don't behave this way, you've got a problem. You're not a good person. You're not a moral person. Something is wrong with the way you behave. Something is wrong with the way you think. About yourself. And a person like this, he doesn't really have yet, the proper approach to life. He doesn't to treat others with kavod, just like he wants to be treated himself. Okay, great. So let's move on. So then it says also, right, the al tier noach lichos. Then this is a very important thing. You know what this is? A lot of people have a problem with this. Sometimes people tell them some kind of remark, right? And they don't like what they heard, from this person, right? So what happens? They get angry right away, angry, kas, and it's fast, like quick, Why is that? Because he doesn't like what this guy's telling him, he's disrespecting him like that. So the thing is, a person who's a smart, clever person, he's not going to be quick, to get angry. He tries to keep everything calm, even though somebody told him something which is insulting to him. You insulted me, But don't be so quick, to jump back at him. You told me this? Okay, I'll tell you this. You told me you did this, I'll do this. Don't be like that. Don't be so quick, to get angry. You have to have patience, with people. That's the thing, And they say, by the way, that this is one of the greatest things that a person can have is a good character. He doesn't get angry at people so fast, And you know what happens, right? Unfortunately, a lot of men, husbands, have this problem with their wives. You know what I mean? Anything, little thing that their wife says gets them angry. Right away. Starts, right? The smoke starts coming out of his ears, getting angry at his wife. Why? Because his wife said something a little bit chutzpah, Okay, she was chutzpah a little bit. Sometimes, the women are chutzpah, they like to, play games a little bit, Some sharp words they say to you. That's how they are sometimes. But you shouldn't, follow along with her, and say, she insulted me, that's it, I'm going to now insult her back. Just like she insulted me, I'm going to get her. This is the wrong approach. A person who behaves this way. Don't be so quick to get angry at somebody, Chill out. He gave you some harsh words, he spoke hard to you. Keep your cool, chill out, don't be so quick. Relax, speak with him, talk it out, speak with him, analyze the situation. But right away, if you start getting, red in your face, the smoke starts coming out, you're going to get into trouble, you're going to insult him, he's going to insult you back, he's going to get into a fight, So especially when a person is talking with his wife, also with his children as well. Same thing, when your child tells you something which is a little bit chutzpah, and not so respectable, don't jump right on him, on your child. So here's the thing, what happens is like this. I'll tell you something really strong, and you'll understand. What happens is like this, sometimes the women, they speak sharp, to their husbands, or whatever, something like that, right? They're sharp, and the husband gets angry, right? So what happens is he insults her back, He says, you gave it to me, I'm going to give it to you, right? But this is a big mistake. You know why? What's the reason why? Because women, the Chazal say they're very sensitive, They get hurt very easily by sharp words. So what happens is that when you insult them back, even though they insulted you, you're hurting her more than she hurt you. You understand? So what's going to be? You're going to make her cry, and she's going to cry. Oh. So there, the Chazal said, right, that what? That watch out, don't speak sharp words to your wife to make her cry. Because if she does, you're going to get punished for that. Because they cry very easily, women, they get hurt very easily. So don't speak sharp words with a woman. You know, that's not a good thing. Even though she spoke sharp to you, doesn't mean you should speak sharp to her. Because she's not the same thing as you. Don't try to, make it equal, Oh, you gave me, I give you also. No! You gotta be a man. You gotta be strong, and stay calm. Don't get angry at her. Chill out. Don't speak sharp with her just like because she spoke sharp with you. No. It's not tit for tat, Midah keneged midah. No, it's not like that with women. You gotta be gentle with them, You gotta be a gentleman. You gotta speak gentle with ladies. So don't try that. Same thing they say, with a child also. Don't speak harsh words to your children. Why? Because they say, oh my God, my father spoke like this to me. He thinks I'm a total monkey, idiot, idiot. So that means, he gets very hurt by that, that his father doesn't like him. His father doesn't respect him. It's no good. You can't speak like sharp words like that to your children, So you gotta speak gentle with them, You can tell them musar, rebuke, tochacha. You can tell them, but don't say sharp things too much because you're going to hurt them. They say, there's two people in this world who are very sensitive, and you can't hurt them. You know who that is? Women and children. This is the thing, So with them, you got to speak gentle. They say, if you speak too harsh with your child or with your wife, with women, what happens is that they can go off the derech, get lost. Or they leave the family, they leave everything, they can totally get lost because you spoke too harsh with them. You were too harsh. So with women and children, because they're very sensitive and they get hurt, you got to be gentle with them. Don't jump on them, like this, like they insulted you. Don't do the same thing. That's what we're saying. Okay, great. So we'll do one more here. We'll stop here. So it says, "Veshuv yom echad lifnei mitatecha." So this is also an important one, Chazal tell you, right, as an advice. What's the advice? The advice is, do teshuvah all the time, every day. Why is that? Because you don't know, lo aleinu, we don't know which day we're going to die, Who knows? You don't know what's going to be. You could be old, you could be young, a person, lo aleinu. So what happens like this, if you do teshuvah all the time, you're not too late. You're not going to be too late. What happens is if you say, you know what, let me wait a little bit, let me wait to do teshuvah. When I get older, senior citizen, pensia, when I go to pensia, 65, then I'll do teshuvah, then I'll be old man already. No, don't wait till 65. Don't wait till pensia. Don't wait till Social Security. Why? Because who knows how long you're going to live? Nobody knows. That's the thing. So if you do teshuvah all the time, every time you do avera, every time you do a sin, do vidui, and regret what you did. Because this way, right, just in case, who knows what's going to be tomorrow. If you're not here tomorrow, you died with teshuvah. You know what I mean? But a person who's saying, oh, let me wait more, a little bit more, when I get old, that's what a lot of people say. The Yetzer Hara tricks them. You know what they say, right? They say, you know what? Now I'm young, I have a big Yetzer Hara, so I'm going to play now, I'm going to be a play, and then, when I get older, when I calm down a little bit, I'll do teshuvah. No, this is a big mistake. Why? Because you don't know what's going to be tomorrow. How long do you know you're going to live? You know what I mean? There's a story like this in the Talmud, that a person is making plans, about his life. Saying, I'm going to do next year this, and in 5 years I'm going to do this, and 10 years, and they're laughing at him, min hashamayim. Why are they laughing? The malachim. You know why they're laughing? Because they're saying, what are you talking about? You fool! You're gonna be dead tomorrow. We're gonna take your neshama tomorrow. What are you talking about next year and 5 years? Next year, 5 years, who knows where you're gonna be? You can be already in Shamayim, What kind of thing is that, right? So that's the way they say, So that's why, by the way, it's a good thing, we Sfaradim, we have a good minhag. What is that? We say vidui every day, shachrit, mincha, and also before we go to sleep. A lot of people, also say another vidui. Not everybody does that, but whoever does it, it's good. At least do Kriyat Shema. If you don't do vidui, at least do Kriyat Shema. That's also good, right? But anyway, the point is, right, that if you do vidui every day, that means you did teshuvah every day, just in case. Who knows what's going to be tomorrow? So it's a good minhag that we have, that we do vidui every day. Once, twice, maybe even 3 times. This way, right, we're always into teshuvah. But one thing I have to tell you, right, which is what? That even if you're doing teshuvah, even if you're doing vidui, but you have to really mean it in your heart, you know. If you don't mean it, you just like automati, you know. Like, you know, just chatati fashalti aviti fashal. But you don't know what you're saying, you don't really mean it in your heart. That's not a good vidui. You have to actually be kaven for vidui, you know. It has to be kavanah. You have to have kavanah for that. So therefore, you know, make sure when you do vidui, you really mean, you know, in your heart what you're saying. Otherwise, it's just like, you know, it just becomes an exercise, you know, like you know, habituation.
Automat.
Yeah, that's not good. We don't want that, right? So do vidui with a full heart. Why? Because when you really do vidui with a full heart, what does that mean? That I sinned, you know, and I'm not going to do it anymore. That's it. I regret what I did. Itcharatti, you know, and I'm not going to sin anymore. If you have this kavanah, they forgive you for all your sins right there on the spot, you know. Even though they have to punish you a little bit, they have to punish you, you know, sometimes for your sins. Depends on what the sin is, by the way, you know. They say that if a person, avar al mitzvat aseh, if he transgressed, right, a positive commandment. For instance, I'll give you an example, right. He didn't put tefillin this day, you know. Today he didn't put tefillin. So he transgressed, right? Mitzvat aseh, min Torah. So if he does vidu, you know, and confesses his sin, they forgive him right there on the spot. That's what it says, you know. Right there, they forgive him. But if he didn't, what do you call it? Here's the thing: if it was something more heavy, you know, like isur karet, you know, isur karet or isur skila, right? I'm gonna skip over lotase, right? I'm gonna skip over that. But the point is like this, right? To make the point here, when he does vidui, they forgive him right away. You know, yeah. Also lotase, right? But lotase is lower. So let's go through all of them, right? If it's lotase, if it's a negative commandment, he also, besides vidui, he also needs Yom Kippur, you know, to get kapara, you know, full kapara. He needs Yom Kippur also. But for mitzvat aseh, he doesn't need Yom Kippur right away. You know, when he does vidui, he's forgiven. That's the difference between aseh and lotase. But Yisur Karet, if he did something like, you know, what does that mean, Yisur Karet? He broke Shabbat, you know. He went and driving on Shabbat. He smoked a cigarette on Shabbat. He cooked something on Shabbat. You know, things like this, you know. He broke Shabbat, things like this, Yisur Karet. Or things like, you know, let's say, Lo Aleinu, you know, he went with a married woman, you know, had relations with a married woman. Lo Aleinu. Committed adultery, you know. That's a very big sin. I mean, they don't forgive you so fast for sins like this. So what happens like this, you know, if a person does vidui on isur karet, things like this, or let's say, you know, he went and he had relations with a man, you know, homosexual, you know, he did, this is a very big sin, you know. So if a person did something like this, just to do vidui, it's not enough. That's the beginning. So what does he need? He needs also Yom Kippur, number 2, and also he needs to have Yisurin. You know, what does that mean? Suffering, to suffer. You know, so he's going to get suffering, you know, punishments. He's going to have to suffer, you know. God knows what's going to be. Hashem knows what the suffering is going to be. We don't know what's going to be, you know. But He knows how to give him the suffering, and the suffering atones for him. So depending on the severity of the sin, you know. But anyway, whatever it is, whatever sin that a person did, it starts with vidui. That's the beginning, you know. That's the beginning. So therefore, Rabbatai, we should do teshuvah every day. This way, we'll never be late. We'll always be on time. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. V'di chanen kashomer. Rtzah kadosh baruch hu lo zechut Yisrael. Leficha churba lahem Torah mitzvot shene'emar Adonai chalfetz. Le'man tzidko yadir Torah ve'yadir.